Canadian participation in the war in Iran? Nothing can be ruled out. And getting Canadians out of a war zone. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The top news stories
and conversations that matter to you.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
The Canadian forces fighting in Iran? It's unlikely, but not entirely out of the realm of possibility, according to Prime Minister Mark Carney.
So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister made those comments during a news conference in the Australian capital of Canberra, alongside his counterpart, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Mr. Carney's stance on the war in Iran is coming under increasing scrutiny. Shortly after the U.S. and Israel actions began on Saturday, the Prime Minister's office issued a statement backing it, saying it supports the United States. He then reiterated that position during a speech in Mumbai. But then days later, when pressed by Canadian news reporters, he seemed to shift his position somewhat, saying he supported the action in Iran with regret, calling it a failure of the international order. Now he's calling for de-escalation. Reporters want to know why he didn't say that in the first place.
Why in your first statement did you not call for any kind of de-escalation?
Because it was the very beginning. We made a statement, Australia made a statement within hours of the beginning of the hostilities. And the objectives of the hostilities, as we understood it, could not have been achieved in that period.
When pressed further, Mr. Carney said there are no certainties in conflict.
And in hindsight, should you have called for de-escalation in that first statement?
No. In hindsight, to that point, in my judgment. Secondly, in terms of war, there are likelihoods, there are possibilities. You have to plan for the worst, but there are no certainties in conflict. And so now that the conflict has moved on, now that the conflict is involving a much wider group, but even if, I don't want to say even if, but moving into the Gulf, moving into civilian infrastructure, we're saying a few things. One, it is not solely the decision of the principal belligerents to move to the de-escalation.
Mr. Carney went on to say that countries in the Gulf region are showing tremendous restraint right now, and he again supported the U.S. and Israel's goals of making sure Iran never develops a nuclear weapon.
It is a very volatile, it's extremely complex situation. It's getting more complex as time goes on. But we absolutely stand by the fundamental principle that Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon and to continue to be a serial violator of international law. And these are not niceties. A serial violator of international law that is killing our citizens, that murders citizens by the thousands in these regions, that funds all the terrorist groups in the Middle East, from Hezbollah to Hamas to the Houthis. That aspect, that objective starts, and that's where we stand.
At any given time, there are nearly 3 million Canadians outside of the country, and that includes tens of thousands of Canadians in the Middle East. It's about 106,000 people in all. 23,000 people in Lebanon alone are registered with Global Affairs, although right now only 164 are seeking emergency transportation out of that country. Plans are being drafted to bring them back to Canada on charter flights, commercial flights, and by land transportation to take people to various airports in other countries if it's safe to do so. Speaking in Ottawa, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said the situation is volatile and changing by the hour.
In some countries, the airspace is open. In others, it is partially open. And in still others, it is fully closed. And so our ROCA system is tailoring the advice to the particular viability of the airspace in the country under discussion.
This travel is being coordinated under what's called a cost recovery basis, so the transportation wouldn't be free. There are also reciprocal arrangements being made with other countries. So, for example, if someone from the UK is on a Canadian flight out of the region, the UK would have an obligation to take Canadians out of the region.
We have 2,035 Canadians who have requested assistance out of 106,000 Canadians who have registered. In each of the countries in which Canadians are requesting help, we are providing chartered flights, block booking of seats on commercial airlines, or exploring land transportation. We've been at this 4 days to ensure that we have options in place for Canadians. We are also working with our allies to ensure that there's this reciprocal arrangement between countries.
In Iran itself, there are about 3,000 Canadians registered with the government. So far, only 74 have asked for help leaving the country. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
With my friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube is back. He's a columnist with the National Post, Loonie Politics, and Troy Media. And he was a speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Welcome back.
Hey, how are you doing, Rob?
Yeah, very good. What do you think about the decision by the United States and Israel to attack Iran?
I think, like most rational people, I'm fully in favor of it. It was about time this happened. Iran has been basically one of the biggest perpetrators, if not the biggest, of creating evil in our world, of terrorism, linking with terrorist groups. They have aligned with evil people. They've aligned with bad groups. They are someone who has been a threat for a long time. And regardless of some people saying, were they an imminent threat right now, you have to look at the history. Since the fall of the Shah of Iran in 1978-79, Iran has quickly become an isolated country, a threat to the West, and a threat to people who believe in the values of freedom, liberty, democracy. There's nothing in the West that actually defends them. There's nothing to defend them. They've been asking for it for a long time. They've toyed with a lot of different things. A lot of countries, including the U.S., Israel, and others, have tried to, negate that as best they could. And the last straw, as you know, as I'm sure you've talked about with other guests, was the fact that, Trump was not able to get anywhere with the current Iranian government, or what was then the Iranian power, the Supreme Council, the mullahs. There's not many of them left anymore. When it came to the nuclear deal, the previous nuclear deal that had been signed by then U.S. President Barack Obama was an abomination, and it was removed correctly. They just would not move at all. They wouldn't budge, and they just basically kept, like most totalitarian nations, rogue states, and others, they just think that they are in charge of these discussions, when in fact, as we're learning now, just from a few days of fighting, they had nothing to go on. So this punishment that they're getting is long since deserved, but the most important thing for the Iranian people, including many millions who have left that country, fleeing in many cases, they now have an opportunity to see freedom in their own country and to see a better place where hopefully they can rebuild, visit one day, reunite with family and friends. There are good things happening here. It's an important moment. It's a difficult moment. There will obviously be deaths. There'll be difficult decisions that have to be made. It's not an easy period of time by any means, but what the U.S. and Israel have done is the right thing.
Okay. Let's talk about Prime Minister Carney, he is getting a lot of questions because he is largely backing this action by the United States and Israel. And he was asked about it during his most recent news conference in Australia. Let's listen again to what Prime Minister Carney said today in Canberra.
It is a very volatile, it's extremely complex situation. It's getting more complex as time goes on. But we absolutely stand by the fundamental principle that Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon and to continue to be a serial violator of international law. And these are not niceties. A serial violator of international law that is killing our citizens, that murders citizens by the thousands in these regions, that funds all the terrorist groups in the Middle East, from Hezbollah to Hamas to the Houthis. That aspect, that objective starts, and that's where we stand.
That's where we stand. He's sounding more like Michael Taube every day. What do you think of that? What do you think about what you're hearing from the Prime Minister there?
Hey, if you want me to come back on this show, there won't be that sort of comparison, Rob.
Okay.
But seriously, no, I mean, I can't argue with anything he's saying right now. It is true that he has flipped and flopped a little bit on it. You know, he has thrown in a couple of lines like, well, President Trump, Donald Trump is difficult to deal with. The U.S. government is difficult to deal with. Anita Anand also came out with sort of mixed messaging. But by and large, I would say that Mark Carney is right on target. He's handling this properly. He's looking at the issue properly. And he recognizes that Canada should defend something like this because we have a large Iranian-Canadian population. They are frustrated with what they've seen for decades. They are, they want freedom. They want something to return of some semblance of what they had before. Was the Shah of Iran perfect? No, and I'm not going to start making a statement like that. But it was much, much better when he was there. In fact, if you look at older pictures of Iran, go back decades, you'll see a very westernized society at one point, one of the most, in fact, in that region. They would like to see a return to that in some semblance, and I agree with that. And I think what Carney is doing is correct. He's aligning, he's aligning with the United States. He's taking the right position. He recognizes, like most Western leaders do, that Iran is a threat. They've been terrible when it comes to international law and virtually everything. So he's doing the right thing. Also he's noted that he was asked that, you can't completely rule out that Canada would eventually join a war. We'll see what happens, but at least he's saying the right things.
All right. When we come back, the politics of Toronto. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Back with Michael Taube, columnist for the National Post, Loonie Politics, Troy Media, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and Toronto resident and voter. And there have been some interesting developments in your part of the country. This is the municipal election year.
Yep.
Who the mayor of Toronto is matters. It has outsized influence, I think, on the entire political landscape. And if you just think about the budget of Toronto, just the city of Toronto, is about the same size as the budget for the entire province of Nova Scotia. So, think about that. So John Tory, the former mayor who resigned because of an extramarital affair. There were lots of rumors that he might run again. He has announced, no, I'm not going to run.
Correct.
Do you think that helps or hurts Olivia Chow, the current mayor?
It actually hurts her simply because it means that there are less political opponents who are running against her. She needs as many people, if not necessarily on the right, because being on the right in Toronto, as I think many people know, is not a political advantage that many like to have. And it's just not something that really fits with this city. The problem is that Toronto just doesn't lean right at center. So conservatives who run realize that they have to do a bit of a balancing act. However, if you had people like John Tory and others that I'm sure we'll talk about quickly, including Brad Bradford, who has sort of now become the leading opponent to Olivia Chow. Chow needs a crowded field. She doesn't need a small field. So the fact that Tory is out for various reasons is a good thing for people who oppose her, but for her, it's not a good.
So Brad Bradford is kind of the leader of the official opposition against Chow at City Council. He has been described as kind of a protege of John Tory, but people who are close to John Tory are telling the news media he has burned some bridges. What do you think about that?
It's a fair assessment. I mean, I've met Brad Bradford. He's a nice guy. The problem is that Brad Bradford is really, firstly, he's not a conservative. I mean, a lot of people talk that way, but he certainly has some right-of-center ideas, but there are liberals who have some right-of-center ideas, and quite frankly, Brad Bradford has supported liberals and conservatives running in various elections. Nothing wrong with that as a strategy, but it also means you're not ideologically consistent. And for that reason, people who like to vote for someone who's in line with their thoughts may not necessarily be pleased with a Brad Bradford running. But on the other hand, to get rid of Olivia Chow, you need to pick someone. So a lot of people may bite their tongues and just move along with Mr. Bradford and his ideas and his concepts and the program that he's obviously going to operate on.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that I have been wondering is there going to be a Doug Ford candidate, like somebody Doug Ford and that Ford Nation could really get behind, because that, to me, would be an advantage for whoever that candidate happens to be. And we know Doug Ford loves to insert himself in Toronto politics. He does it all the time. So now you have a member of the Ford family, Michael. I think he's the nephew of the premier.
That's correct. Yes.
Expressing an interest.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Michael Ford is a nice guy. I've met him as well several times. He is a former Ontario cabinet minister in his uncle's, cabinet. He has actually some municipal experience. He's young, but for his age, he has some solid political experience. No one's going to deny that. The problem is having a little bit of political experience doesn't mean you're necessarily ready to run one of the biggest cities in Canada. You're just not. And I think that the less vote splitting we have, the better it'll be to get rid of Olivia Chow, who has been a huge detriment to the city of Toronto from taxes and politics, her position on the Gaza war, etc. She's just, a nice woman, but she never should have run this city. I've said this a million times. Torontonians are learning. And for that reason, Michael Ford maybe one day could be a potential mayor. Right now, his best move is to stay out.
Okay. Interesting analysis. Thank you, Michael Taube. We'll speak next week. Look forward to it.
You bet. Take care.
Michael Taube. With us every Thursday. Read him in the National Post, Loonie Politics, Troy Media. Focus Nova Scotia, our Thursday Newsday panel coming up next. Much to discuss, especially the budget in Nova Scotia. Lots and lots of cuts and lots of protests about cuts. We'll talk about that next on News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
It's time for our Thursday Newsday panel. That means it's time for Focus Nova Scotia as we welcome back Clinton Desveaux, columnist and political commentator. Welcome back, Clinton. Good to hear from you again.
It's great to hear from you.
And Christine Saulnier is director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Nova Scotia. How are you, Christine?
I'm well.
Yeah, very good to hear from you. Well, the budget. I mean, that's the big story in Nova Scotia is this provincial budget. It's all over the news. There have been dozens upon dozens of news stories since Budget Day about how Premier Tim Houston's budget cuts will impact a wide range of community services. There was a very large protest outside of the Nova Scotia legislature yesterday, protesters decrying cuts to arts and culture programs. So Premier Tim Houston had a news conference. We're going to listen to some of this. And he vowed to stay the course. These cuts are going to happen. Let's listen to the Premier of Nova Scotia.
Is restoring that 1 percentage point to the HST something that the government ought to consider?
No.
You said during your remarks on Saturday night at the African Heritage Month Gala, you said, compassion is measured by what we do in tough times. And I wonder what you would insist. How does that juxtapose with the fact that many of these cuts that we see are to programs that support people with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, people from marginalized backgrounds, students? How do you juxtapose those two things?
No, like spending is up overall. I mean, we have a number of various communities like that feel like they were targeted. Everyone's saying they were targeted, but if everyone's targeted, then that just means that the cuts they're broad. And in some cases, you know, they are certainly having they're felt as more significant. Budget spending is up overall because of continued investment in healthcare. That's important to Nova Scotians as well. Budget spending is up because of investments in infrastructure and all kinds of things that matter. But you know, it's a province that cares deeply about each other, cares deeply about their community. So anytime you have a change to a program, it elicits a response, and that's okay. That's what makes us Nova Scotians. But we're in a difficult situation. We're making the best decisions we can.
We are in a difficult situation. We're making the best decisions that we can. Overall spending is up. We're not targeting specific programs because the cuts are too broad. Christine Saulnier, what do you think about the rationale of the Premier and what you're hearing there?
Well, I think the cuts are actually fairly specific, right? So that even if you just look at the 130 million cut, a lot of that is cut in specific sectors, the community sectors, the nonprofits. That's who's feeling these cuts. While it might seem broad in terms of, you know, it's not just arts and culture, it's family resource centers, it's disability supports, all of that. But, you know, you're not cutting out of some of the fossil fuel infrastructure funding. You're not making decisions about taxing higher income people. You're actually giving higher income people tax cuts. So, you know, I'd push back on the evidence here that these cuts are not going to have a tremendous ripple effect on the things that the Premier said are important to him around getting things online that are going to, you know, grow the economy. Well, I think what we're hearing, and certainly what I saw yesterday in the street and the day before, I haven't seen that level of protest in this province in a very long time, is really that so many community organizations have been underfunded for decades and have actually been doing what Premier Houston just said. They've been stepping up. They've been filling in the gaps because so many of our systems have been underfunded for so long. So, you know, I think the evidence has been in the streets. The evidence has been in what people are sharing. And you look at things like the caregiver grant. So those are caregivers who are in the home. That saves tremendous amount of money in the healthcare system if people aren't having to go into home care or long-term care. These are very short-sighted cuts that are going to have a tremendous impact. Negative.
Okay. He says he's going to stay the course. And it was such an interesting news conference because you can barely hear the news reporters asking the questions, but you can really hear people are outside the legislature. You can hear them inside the legislature while the Premier is speaking. You can hear their cheers. You can hear their chants. You can hear the banging of the drums. Really quite something. Clinton, what do you think about what you're hearing from the Premier? He vows to stay the course.
Well, look, I would say, you know, it's good that Premier Tim Houston is attempting to put a plan of action together. But I think he would agree with me that Nova Scotia has a massive revenue problem. So one of the issues in Nova Scotia is that it currently has the third oldest population in Canada, behind Newfoundland and ahead of, behind Newfoundland and New Brunswick, and just ahead of Prince Edward Island. And then, of course, you know, the tariffs in the United States has posed a huge problem on the Nova Scotia budgets and Nova Scotia government spending priorities, because the tariffs from both the United States and China on lobster and crab seafood exports was, you know, a huge problem for the province of Nova Scotia, not just directly, but the indirect revenue that's generated from the different industries connected to it. And then, of course, if we look, when the federal provincial cost share programs were first introduced in Canada in 1958, You had equal sharing of 50-50. So the feds covered 50%, the provinces covered 50%. And over the course of, the last 5 decades, the percentage that the feds cover has been slowly reduced over time. And so the province is having to make up those shortfalls, and what we end up with are these huge deficits. So Premier Tim Houston needs to find a way to generate more revenue, and that's a longer term plan. That's not something that can happen in the short term. So, look, I feel bad for the guy, and I feel bad for the decision makers in Nova Scotia that are facing these consequences.
Okay, well, when we come back, let's talk about alternatives. Christine is with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. What are the alternatives here? He says he's not going to raise the provincial portion of the HST. It seems to be more of a longer-term strategy, relying on economic growth that could come from projects like offshore natural gas, for example. Wind West, he's very bullish on. Let's talk about alternatives here. This is a province with a $1.2 billion budget deficit, an overall debt approaching $30 billion, headed for $35. This is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
It's Focus Nova Scotia. Clinton Desveaux is here, columnist, political commentator. Christine Saulnier, director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Nova Scotia. $1.2 billion budget deficit. A provincial debt that is approaching $30 billion, on its way to $35 billion. As Clinton pointed out, an aging population. Already more than 1 out of every $3 in this budget goes to one thing and one thing only, and that's the healthcare sector. So the premier has said we essentially, I don't want to put words in his mouth, we've hit a fiscal wall. Tough choices have to be made. We have to protect core services. What are the alternatives, Christine, in your opinion? What's an alternative?
Well, we have I think an 80-page alternative budget with the alternatives. That includes, we do have to look at our tax system for sure. The revenue issue is an important one. But even if we listen to Houston, around royalty revenues, we look at gold mining in this province. We only asked the last company for 1% of net royalty revenues. That's giving it away. So even if that's the road that you want to take, which is not the road we recommend, we definitely recommend that you ask more from those companies. For us, it's really looking at why do we, something has to give here. I also calculate the living wage. I look at both sides of the equation. What are families needing to pay, and what are they getting paid? That's also part of this revenue shortfall. We have a very structurally low-waged economy in Nova Scotia. That means less revenue for the government. Can't cut our way to prosperity, so what do? We do have room to make sure that those who can afford to pay a little more do pay a little more. This budget did exactly the opposite. We've done that analysis that looked at what's the impact of the HST cut, the cuts to the income tax. And we still do see in Nova Scotia that those who have not been struggling are those that will be benefiting. And now we see more cuts to little programs that have been helping people on the ground. So the alternatives are, let's address the revenue, and let's figure out how we actually have more of a public option in various ways. So the wind power, I think, is one way to think about as we move forward. Where's the public purchase on that front? And what are we doing to make sure that companies are paying their fair share here? We've certainly seen mining companies leave where we're stuck with the bill at the end. That's not the way forward. In terms of healthcare, there's definitely been decisions that have been very wasteful. We have a public-private partnership for the largest capital infrastructure build ever in Atlantic Canada, the $7.4 billion in the new healthcare hospital infrastructure build. That's a P3. We are going to be paying profit-tiering companies for decades for that decision. This government, and I don't know why there's not more discussion about this, in this budget, admitted that they're going to take on a $3 billion loan to what are mostly for-profit corporations who own long-term care homes in this province. We're just going to take that on and add it to the debt. it's time for us to really think about ways that we need to be not doing that kind of decision making.
All right, those are some alternatives. What are your alternatives, Clinton, other than what's happening here?
Well, clearly the status quo isn't going to work. So, there's a few things that I think the overwhelming majority of Nova Scotians would support. So the first thing is that they need to develop the offshore natural gas projects. The Europeans are desperately asking for natural gas. And so Nova Scotia has to find a way to get that there. But more importantly, it has to be expedited. Like, permitting cannot drag on for years, before a well is dug. And same thing with the WindWest offshore wind turbine project. The opportunity to export electricity to other parts of Canada, but also the New England states, is something that would definitely help stabilize the economic future of Nova Scotia. And then the other important part of this, which ties into permitting and revenue generation, is we can talk about critical minerals. We can talk about a clean future all we want, but if it's going to take years to get mines approved for critical minerals, then we're never going to see the revenue generated from it. And the reality is that you're not going to have a transportation sector which is primarily based around electrification if you don't have the critical minerals that form of transportation is going to require. And then lastly, what I would say is that Nova Scotia and quite frankly the Maritimes, they need to find an easier, shorter way to get products, export products and goods to market. So one of the things they could consider looking at, and they've talked about this for decades, is the New Brunswick, Maine, east-west highway that would allow goods to travel, in and out of Canada, in and out of New England with significantly shorter distances. Those are a few things that I would, if I was advising Tim Houston, I would say, we need to get these in order and we need to expedite them as quickly as possible.
Okay. Look, when we come back, we'll have a brief discussion about Premier Houston's obsession with on-reserve pot shops. There were a series of RCMP raids across the province again in recent days. And when he was asked about why his government wants to see this happen, he said drugs are bad. Drugs are bad. Let's discuss this when we return. He's spending a lot of political capital on this. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Yeah, it's Focus Nova Scotia. Christine Saulnier is with us, Director, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Nova Scotia. Clinton Desveaux, Nova Scotia columnist, political commentator as well. I want to circle back to this Premier Houston news conference yesterday. He was asked, why are the RCMP raiding on reserve pot shops? And what do you think about comments from people like Terry Paul, who's the chief, the CEO of the Member to Reserve, thriving reserve on Cape Breton Island? He says there's a treaty right to sell cannabis, and the Premier disputes that and says drugs are bad. Let's listen to this.
Chief Terry Paul says Mi'kmaq people have an inherent treaty right to sell and grow cannabis. Is he wrong?
Drugs are bad. Drugs are hurting communities across our province and across our country. The sale of drugs is not a treaty right.
Sale of drugs is not a treaty right. All right. I want to get into this because the Premier is spending a lot of political capital on having the RCMP going on to reserves across Nova Scotia and raiding these places. The only place to legally buy it is through the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission. What is he up to? What is with this? Clinton, what do you think about the Premier's obsession with this?
Well, that's a great question you have, Rob, and I think it ties into our earlier discussion about Nova Scotia's revenue problems and spending issues. And that's that because he's a Conservative Premier, and he's a Conservative Premier that's running some massive deficits, while at the same time adding substantial amounts of money to the debt, he needs to be able to keep his base within the Conservative Party motivated. He needs to keep them, in the tent, so to speak. And so by waging a culture war around the issue of marijuana, an issue that was settled over a decade ago in Canada, right across the country in every region of the country. I think it speaks to that. I think he needs to find a way to keep his base motivated. It's a great way to generate, party revenue. It's a great way to sell party memberships. It's a great way to,
It's about the base.
That's what I think is going.
The political base. Christine, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the political base argument. I mean, I would say, 9 years post legalization, maybe it is time to actually have a real look at what we've done right and perhaps where we need to change in terms of cannabis regulation, right? Like, I think what Terry Paul is saying, the chief, is that it's unregulated. They would argue not illegal. So there's that side. Like, certainly there were lots of people who were not happy with the rollout of the way that cannabis happened, legalization. So maybe it's time to really look at that. And I do think, the other side is, where does this fit in the relationship with the Mi'kmaq? And it's troubling to me to see this be something that they've decided perhaps is a political calculus. We've seen them actually withdraw, right?
We've talked about whether developing natural resources projects, whether that's going to be wind farms or other natural resources projects, you're going to need buy-in from these leaders and these communities. Do you want to sour that relationship right now over pot? I don't know. You're playing with fire. I don't get it. Thank you to the both of you. Clinton Desveaux, great to hear from you. And Christine Saulnier, hope you'll come back sometime. Great to hear from you today. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Focus Nova Scotia. Talkback is coming up next. Public education is going to be our focus today. Violence in the schools at crisis levels. Let's discuss on Talkback. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today, we're not going to talk about the war in Iran. We've talked about that all week on Talkback, and the war will still be there tomorrow. Today, we're going to talk about a conflict of a different kind. That is what is happening in the classrooms of Canada. And here's a question for you. What do you think should be done to restore order in our schools? What do you think should be done to restore order in our schools? Because violence and harassment in Canadian schools are at crisis levels. What could be done about that? What should be done about that? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. And I have a follow-up question. Have you or do you know someone who works in the education system experienced violence or harassment? Do you know someone who has experienced violence or harassment in the school system? Do you work in the school system? What can you tell us about the prevalence of violence in the school setting? We would like to get some first-hand accounts. We'll take second-hand accounts as well. We just want to get a better understanding of the situation. The reason we want to jump into this today is because there is a new report, and it says the situation in Canada's schools, violence, harassment, it is so bad. Schools in this country should be classified as hazardous workplaces. Schools in Canada, it says, should be declared hazardous workplaces. That's how bad it is. Hazardous workplaces. Schools are hazardous to work in. Like, what do you think of when you think of a hazardous workplace? I grew up in a coal mining part of the country. I think coal mines are hazardous workplaces, or being in the commercial fishery, or working on a farm, or being a police officer, or a firefighter, or a paramedic can be hazardous. Well, now researchers in a brand new report from the University of Ottawa are saying we should add working in our schools to the list of hazardous workplaces. The report is called Canadian Schools, a Hazardous Workplace. That's the name of the report, brand new, released just a couple of weeks ago. Didn't receive a lot of media coverage. We want to kind of dig into it today and get your thoughts at 1-833-668-2577. Here's another reason. I had a conversation recently with a school teacher around here. And this person told me they spent a half-day session, a PD day, professional development day, learning self-defense. Self-defense, training the staff in self-defense, a half-day course on what the teacher and the support staff can do, what they can't do to defend themselves and deal with violence in the classroom. This school district has an expert, goes to all the schools in the area, teaches the employees in the school how to defend themselves within the confines of the law. And I asked them, is it really that bad? And they said, you have no idea. It is almost an everyday thing. And a new report from the University of Ottawa backs that up. The situation is so severe. I mean, it's so severe, it can keep two university researchers busy for a whole school year digging into it, doing research on it. And that's what they did. They talked to more than 4,000 education workers across the country, not just teachers, all sorts of people working in the public education system. And what they found were, quote, alarmingly high rates and frequencies of violence, hitting, kicking, biting, hair pulling, objects being thrown at staff. The vast majority of cases is a student. It's not always a student, but 80% of the time it's a student. Sometimes it's parents. Sometimes parents are becoming violent. In rare cases, colleagues and other staff members are becoming violent, even supervisors. It's rare, but it happens. And it's not just violence, it's harassment. Students harassing staff at school, too. It's much more common for parents to harass a teacher or a member of the school staff than for a parent to actually become violent. Almost 40% of these 4,000 educational workers who were studied say they've been harassed by a parent in their workplace. And apparently the school setting is rife with workplace harassment, employees harassing other employees. This report offers, I'm telling you, you read it, harrowing accounts of what it's like to work in the public schools of this country. And you when you read it, you get a better appreciation of why teachers don't want to be teachers anymore, why EAs are fleeing, why school districts across the country are having a hard time finding staff, and people are fleeing education as a profession. Listen to this just as one example. This is from an educational assistant quoted in this report. I was working with a student who told me if that I didn't let him do what he wanted to do, he would tell the principal and his parents I was touching him inappropriately. I didn't react to his threat at the time. I told him that he needed to do his work. I reported the incident to the principal and the teacher and found out he makes these threats regularly. Now I make sure I'm not in a situation where I'm alone with him again. Here's another one. I am dealing with so much violence this year. I lose sleep, and I question whether it's time to leave the profession. It makes me really sad. The violence is out of control. I'm actively looking for alternative jobs. I used to love working in this field. Another one. I'm exhausted and frustrated daily. I have no energy left for my family. I'm tired and achy all the time. Anxiety is at debilitating levels. On weekends, it takes me until Sunday to have the energy to do anything. My family and social life suffer more than I want to share, and many of my colleagues feel hopeless. That's from a clerical worker in one of our schools. Does that sound like a place you would want to work? And what kind of learning environment is this for students? What kind of places are we sending our children to every day? because it sounds more like a jail yard than a schoolyard at times. Offer an opinion. It's a crisis. Something needs to be done to restore order in Canadian schools. What do you think should happen? And if you have firsthand experience, or you know someone, a family member, a friend, who has experienced working in this sort of toxic environment, tell us those stories today. At 1-833-668-2577 on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Violence and harassment in Canada's schools is our topic. It's at crisis levels. What can be done to restore order in Canada's classrooms? Do you have any experience with it or know someone who has? 1-833-668-2577. To David up first on Talkback today in Mountain View, Alberta. Hello, David.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, very good, David. It's your
Awesome.
experience. What's your opinion?
My opinion is, and it might be a very unpopular one, but it's probably a threefold strike. One, I think that the major reason why we're seeing so much chaos is because I believe that Christianity has been pulled away from the school system. We're a nation founded upon Judaism, Christianity, under basic 10 commandments and the rule of law that comes from that. From there, then it comes a sense of peace and law and order and the wonderful, amazing C word, consequences. Along with the Lord's Prayer.
Well, I don't think we have to impose, say, one religion over another.
No.
But I think you're going to.
But
are you not
will
going to
say
discipline?
this, okay?
Right?
I'll say this really quickly. Every Muslim, every Hindu, every Jew, every Christian will believe in the basic 10 commandments structure. Don't steal, love your neighbor as you love yourself mindset, and that kind of thing. That whole Christianity thing can definitely be debated for sure, but I just want to make it very clear that when we leave consequences from breaking the laws, that which has been founded upon us, I believe that is a strong pull away from common sense, so to say, and that allows the breeding ground.
So what would you do then?
Now,
what would you do? How
that,
does that play itself out in a school setting?
In the school setting, I strongly believe that a national unity needs to happen first and foremost, and that comes in from the very basic of singing the Canadian national anthem every single morning in the school system. We're all Canadian citizens here. If you attend our school system, you use our public services, it's a part of integration, and that'll be a very strong sense of unity within classmates. We all stand underneath one flag, one belief structure. The Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms needs to be taught and educated within that. Along with that perspective being taught in the school system, it'll create a sense of rule, law, order, and structure, which is what children need the most. Secondly, along with that, any violation and breach of that in any way, shape, or form, I think the government and the school system needs to grow a pair of balls, and they need to start kicking kids out of school and even banning parents from attending on school property if they dismiss the basic rules of law, and post it right up there. Violence, toxicity, hate speech, any of that has a zero tolerance going forward, and will be not only
zero tolerance. Okay, zero tolerance. So you would take a very hard line. Thank you, David, for your call. There are two lines available if you want to grab one right now. Love to hear from you. Let's go to Tracy is in Calgary. Tracy. Hi, Tracy.
Yep. Hi, Rob.
Hi,
Thank
Tracy.
you for having me.
My pleasure.
2 points I can make. About 25 years ago, a friend of ours, more of an associate, put her kid in school, kindergarten. The teacher actually had to send him home, and he was not allowed back in school because he said, "You cannot say no to me. You're not allowed." So the kid, rightly so, you know what, go home, parent, take him home, teach him the word no, because that's not going to happen. Second, I know of one teacher's assistant who actually has to wear bite guards on her arms because
I've heard that.
attacked by these kids.
I've heard that.
Unbelievable. I don't understand. Why do they have to be in school when they're violent like that? Because we're trying to be all inclusive?
Yep, I have heard that. Teachers wearing protective gear on their forearms and whatnot from getting scratched and bitten and whatnot. That's where we are now in schools. Yep. So what do you do about that?
We are. Oh, I personally don't think that those children should be in school. They should be taught somewhere else. If you want to make a special school for them, I don't know where you'd find teachers to do that. But they should not be allowed in school. It's, first of all, not fair to the teachers. And what about the kids that they're harming? The other students.
All right. So, this goes to, you're talking about high special needs students should not be in regular classrooms. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting that thing, yes.
Yes. All right. Okay. Understood. Thank you. Be right back. What can be done to restore order in Canadian classrooms if you have experiences, first-hand, second-hand experiences, if you have a spouse, a partner in the school system who has experiences? I want to hear from you today on Talkback. Very important topic here. Brand new report out. Really shines a light on it. Be right back. Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
A new report says Canada's schools meet all the criteria of being hazardous workplaces because of violence and harassment at crisis levels. What can be done to restore order in the classroom, in the school setting? And if you have any experience, we want to hear from you today. 1-833-668-2577. Grant in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Grant.
Hi.
Hi, Grant. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been listening here for a bit. I've never heard of the bite guards. That's pretty nasty stuff. But maybe they should start finding parents. And like the one lady said there, I know when I was growing up, going to school, they had special schools for bad kids. So I don't know if they still do today or not. But I mean, find the parents. And the other thing you mentioned there about the one teacher saying that the child said they would tell authorities that they touched them inappropriately. Well, have security cameras in classrooms and detention rooms.
Security cameras in classrooms. All right. That's very interesting. Security cameras in classrooms. Probably not a bad idea. What's under debate right now in the province of Ontario, I can tell you, is police. A lot of school districts, major school districts, took police out of the schools. Police resource workers.
There was
police resource PROs, I think they're called. Yeah. Do we need police in the schools?
I don't think it's a bad idea. There was one in high school when I went to high school.
Okay. Right. I never had police in the schools that I went to, but I guess it was a different time. It was a long time ago. So, but there's a great debate about whether we need more police in schools. People who say, well, we don't need more police. We need more therapists, or we need more counselors, this sort of thing. Mental health experts, not police.
Well, you got to do something. I mean, a lot of kids realize that there's nothing that they can do to them. So the police might be a good deterrent.
All right. Thank you. Yep. Good to hear from you, Grant. Thank you. Let's go to Halifax. Dave is in Halifax. Hi, Dave.
Yes. Thank you, Rob, for taking my call.
Yeah. You're welcome, Dave.
You know, this is the fabric of our society, and it's gone crazy. But firstly, I don't think it's every kid out there. I think there's certainly a percentage, but it is a sad day when you have metal detectors at high schools. Now, I have a suggestion, and it would be a little complex, but have you ever spoken to somebody who's been in the military? They're very well spoken.
Sure. Yes.
Yes, I don't mean yes, sir, no, sir. How about a mandatory, like in many countries? And by the way, in other countries, especially Asian countries, you wouldn't get away with this stuff. That's why they are far more advanced than we are. We are poor in English. We are poor in math, way at the bottom. Something's very wrong. We're in a crisis situation here.
Okay. Well, just on that point, if I could, if I could just jump in there. In the province of Quebec, they passed a law in the province of Quebec about classroom conduct, and it's all around civility. And now students are not only expected, it's the law. They must address staff in the school in a formal way. Okay? It's not Mr. Dave, it's Sir or Mr.
Hallelujah, brother. Hallelujah,
or Mrs.
brother. No,
or
I
Miss.
think,
And if not, there are sanctions, there are penalties. You know, and the government said it's out of control. We need to reinforce authority, that the staff runs the school, not the students. What do you think about an idea like that?
I love it, and this is the way we got to go, sadly, but I think a mandatory military 1-year term for them would be terrific. Thank you.
Mandatory service. Okay, bye-bye. Mandatory service in the military. Well, that usually happens, I think, after school, doesn't it? Weigh in on that, though, if you want.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Canada's schools, according to a new report from the University of Ottawa, meet the criteria of being hazardous workplaces because of violence and harassment, the prevalence of violence and harassment at crisis levels. What could be done to restore order in our schools? And if you have any personal experiences, by all means, share them. Jim in Nova Scotia. Thanks for calling, Jim.
How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, very good, Jim. What's your opinion?
I'm old school. I think we should bring back the strap.
Well, that is old school.
That is old school,
Corporal
but you know
punishment.
what? Everybody had the respect for the teachers. Nobody was out of line like this. None of this foolishness was happening. Now the world's just gone soft.
Okay, the world's gone too soft. Do you think bringing the strap back, bringing corporal punishment back would restore order in the class, instill discipline? You're saying, right?
Well, you need to have the respect for the teachers. Now the teachers can't do anything because if the teachers do anything, they get all the parents screaming and yelling at them like they're doing something wrong. The kids have no fear of the teachers at all. They can sit there and look at you and say, I'm not doing nothing, then you can't do nothing about it.
Well, I will say, we have what is called the spanking law still on the books, still part of the criminal code. In the last parliament, there were efforts to try and repeal that corporal punishment should not be allowed in any setting anymore, whether it's in a school setting or parents using physical discipline, corporal punishment to discipline their children. There was a move to repeal that. The biggest opponents to the, if you'll let me finish, please, the biggest opponents to repealing that section of the criminal code were teachers' organizations saying you would be tying our hands.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You get people coming into schools pretending they're cats. What's up with that?
Okay, I don't know, but I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that. But, thank you. But I guess to the caller's point, and I hate to be, that old guy who talks about the old days and the way things used to be, but, when I was in the public school system, I could just never imagine being violent against a teacher. And I actually can't remember it ever happening. Not to say it never happened, but I never saw it. I'm a child of the 80s. I never once saw a student raise a hand to a teacher. But I get it that it's 2026, not 1986 anymore. But teachers back in those days commanded their classrooms, and you feared going to the principal's office. But do you want to necessarily go back to those days? Because I grew up in that era when there was corporal punishment in the classrooms. And it was not unheard of for teachers or principals to dish out corporal punishment as a form of discipline. And I have seen students get hit with rulers and leather straps. Do you really want to go back to those days? I, for one, don't think we need to go back to those days, but very clearly there's discipline problems in our schools, not just with students, with parents as well. 1-833-668-2577. For the first time, there are 3 or 4 lines available. Sandra is in Halifax. Thanks for calling, Sandra.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Hi, Sandra. Yeah, very good, Sandra.
First of all, I don't think singing the flag every morning is going to solve these issues, although I, respect the Canadian flag very much. But I have a silly idea, okay? Depending on the degree of the misbehavior, there should be in all the schools or schools with these issues, 1 or 2 classrooms, depending on the size of the school, that are specialized classrooms. And in each classroom, there's 2 teachers, and those teachers are also trained in counseling and corrections and psychology issues. But when a child or a student misbehaves, they're sent to these specialized classrooms immediately. And when they walk in, the first thing they do is they have a 15 to 30-minute counseling session with the school counselor and with other people present, other teachers, okay? So it's safe for everybody. And then you keep that child in the classroom, for the rest of the day, and they continue with the studies that would have gone on in the integrated class. But I just think that we just can't say to these kids every day, you got to behave without teaching them. And we need the resources, and, those classrooms could have cameras, have security somehow within the school, but you have to take the time and you have to use the resources to help these children out when they're young, because if they get away with all this when they're a child, then when you become an adult, you don't, a lot of times you don't change.
But what you're suggesting is, much more attention needs to be paid and directed at students who do have special needs or are more prone to acts of violence.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying,
exactly.
because of the disruption that it's causing in the general environment in the school.
That's right. That's right. Children with issues, whether it's environmental or chemical, we know that waiting for health care and other things, can take such a long time. So have it all in the school, have it there, let the kids continue to be taught, but also, they have to obviously, learn about some, better behavior within the school. And you can involve the parents. You can have, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say police officers every day, but, they can do the rounds every week in these schools. They have done it here in the HRM in Halifax, and I'm not sure what they're doing today, but I think it did help because they're also educators. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Very good to hear from you. It's not a crazy idea at all. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Canadian schools are a hazardous workplace, according to a new report. What can be done to restore order in the classroom? If you have personal experience, we'd love to hear you. On Talkback today on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Canada schools, according to a new report, Canada schools meet the criteria of being hazardous workplaces. And I read this report in advance of the program today. Very troubling accounts. In every way, it sounds like working in a typical public school these days is like working in a toxic workplace. Quote from an actual school staff support member, "It's deflating to see the normalization of violence, especially against women. And students who are not exposed to violence in their homes are being traumatized. They are being traumatized by the violence they see in schools. We are creating a new generation of traumatized students who are falling behind in school." Another one, "I have worked with very physically violent students who chase, kick, hit, and bite teachers and early childhood educators, students who witness a scream. They're frightened to be around certain students. I mean, what kind of learning environment is this? Let alone what kind of workplace is it? 1-833-668-2577. Brian in Calgary today. Hello, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I offer a bit of a unique perspective. I went through special ed when I was in school because I was one of those people that did act out, and I was prone to acting out. What it came down to was I had the intelligence, but I didn't know how to use it, and that's where special ed was successful with me. The lady from Halifax, the one that talked about setting up a special ed classroom, I think had the right idea, because for me, I was not capable of being in the special ed system when I first went into school. And what they did with me was, as I became more capable, they slowly integrated me into the mainstream. But that took about 3.5, 4 years to do.
Wow.
And
what sort of attention, what sort of resources were you given in that environment?
Well, I actually went through an experimental program to learn how to teach people with dyslexia, how to read. There were five of us in the class. There was one teacher, and there was also psychological evaluations every so often as well.
Very interesting. I wonder if we could do that nowadays, or whether school resources are just stretched so thin that whether the school systems don't have the capacity to do it. I don't know the answer to that.
Let's look at it this way. If, let's say, you have 10% of the student population that is special needs in some way, not everybody needs the same amount of attention as I needed, but they might need some. But having the special ed stream would allow the other students to continue to advance at a normal pace. Therefore, they would be out of school, probably producing more, and over the long run, would be more productive members of society because they were able to learn the things they needed to learn. Higher income, therefore more tax revenue. Eventually, it would pay for itself.
It would pay for itself. Yeah, interesting, Brian. I'm glad it worked out for you. We're going to another Brian in, is it Wellesley, Ontario? Brian?
Yep.
Are you with me? Yeah, hi there,
Yeah,
Brian.
I'm with
Yeah,
you.
good to hear from you. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I wanted to share an experience that I've had and just kind of a thought. So I've been dealing with the Waterloo Regional District School Board for a while now. I have two daughters that are in the school board. Both have been bullied pretty bad. And every time I go back to the school with the same individuals, they're always blocked. They're not allowed to, they can only suspend up to a day. They're not allowed to expel. I mean, it's come to a point where I think that there are roadblocks in place for the school to be able to actually remove the individuals that are actually causing the big problems. And I can tell you some of the issues were like even violence. Like my daughter's been beat up by a boy. I've had threats of rape on my daughters in the school board. And the superintendent's even telling me right to my face, there's nothing we can do. 1 day suspension, 1 day suspension. How many times can you do that in a year?
Right.
So,
right.
I mean,
so what do you,
to me,
what do you do about that? There's something needs to be done about that.
That's the thing. I've gone to them heart and soul, put everything into it, and it's like it's running into a brick wall every time. So I don't know where the rule needs to change, but I know that there's a certain. I'm not going to say children with special needs is a different story. So like the last caller, Brian, there, great name by the way. That kind of stuff that's a separate entity. I think we're talking more on the kids that are misbehaved. I think a lot of it has to do with parenting, and I'm not gonna say every case does, but I think that the parents need to be more involved in this stuff. And if they're not able to take care of their child and have them fixed in that situation, I really do believe that those children need to be removed from the school. And I mean, home education, something else needs to happen, but that would take away a lot of issues, especially in my case.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Yep. Good to hear from you. All the best to you in Wellesley, Ontario today. Sarah in Kitchener, hang on the line. Donna in Northern Alberta, take your call just ahead on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
On violence in the schools, Donna in Northern Alberta. Hello, Donna. Thanks for calling. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking the call.
Yeah, you're welcome, Donna. What's your opinion?
I've got a threefold part answer. I think just as the last caller said, Brian, about the administration, they have no avenues right now. I left teaching about 15 years ago because of this very reason. And school boards don't have the ability to discipline or put children in a situation where they can get better. And so there's sometimes if you don't have a strong school board or even a strong administration, principal, vice principal situation, that causes problems. As well as the fact that a really big role is the parents. I had experienced some bullying when I was teaching maybe 20 years ago, and the only reason that it ended successfully was because the principal and the parents were so involved and took responsibility for their roles and what they needed to do to help the student, and he got better. But I also believe that a structured classroom, a structured school is important. I believe that the Canadian anthem, the Lord's Prayer, structure like that where children know what they're expected to do and what they're part of a bigger world and not just in their own world. They're part of a bigger community. So the fact is that we need more support. And it's children right now that are coming to school not nourished, not rested. They're part of broken homes or they're having abuse. And they're coming with all these complex issues, and they bring them into the classroom and they have nobody to help them. And so we need to start going back to funding special situations where we have school nurses like we used to, social counselors and things like that. We don't have those things available in schools anymore, and the kids are getting dropped and they're getting lost. And right now the parents are not responsible either. And I think that also if a child is going to be disciplined, what they need to do is they need to have the parents be part of that discipline. And if they're not going to do anything about it, then the parents should be held responsible for their children's behavior as well.
I'm just curious, you say, well, there's nothing the schools can do. There's nothing the boards can do when it comes to, say, enforcement of, people who are physically violent, students who are physically violent. What do you know about why enforcement measures are lacking? What happened there? What's going on there? This never used to be tolerated.
Well, it was because that society has changed. We've gone so far from the other spectrum. Like, I don't believe in corporal punishment. I do believe in a child's accountability, but I don't believe that hitting them will make them respect you. Especially teenagers, they're not going to respond to that. But I think that what's happening is our society in general has made everything, like, they've made excuses for everything. Children are not held accountable for anything. Their behaviors, if they do something wrong, there is no repercussions, and they don't understand. Those T-shirts that came out like 25 years ago, it said no fear. That's what kids have. They have no fear. And in that, they have no respect. And I also think that, even something like children today, when they finish high school, like they did in South Africa, where after high school, they go on to post-secondary, and then you do like something in the military corps. I think children that are not going into
lots of countries do that. Lots of countries do that. Yeah. Okay, it's curious. You're the second person to bring that up, and you left the education profession because of this, because of violence in the classroom.
Well, violence, and it's not just it's the verbal violence as well. And watching some of the younger teachers today are not they're not as strong as the older ones in terms of being able to handle this because they're still coping with things themselves.
Okay. Very valuable phone call, Donna. Thank you so much. We will be right back with hour number 2 of Talkback on this topic. Love to hear from you, okay? Violence and harassment in Canada's schools. What can be done to restore order?
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Talking about violence and harassment in Canada's schools. That's our topic. It's at crisis levels, according to a new report from researchers at the University of Ottawa. They say most of Canada's schools these days meet the criteria of being hazardous workplaces. What can be done to restore order in the classrooms of the nation? If you have experience, we'd like to hear from you. So this report, just a few more details. It asked for feedback from more than 4,000 people who work in public education during an entire school year. One of the questions they asked employees who work directly with students, like in the classroom, is, have you experienced student-initiated violence in the last year? 90% said yes. 90%. They asked the support staff, clerical staff, custodial staff, what about you? Experienced student-initiated violence in the last year? 71% said yes. So it comes with the territory now. It's part of everyday work life. And the report says more and more education workers are now experiencing PTSD because of their working conditions. PTSD from working in the schools. Quote, firsthand account, I have PTSD from the violence in my workplace. Every aspect of my life has been affected. I stopped sleeping. I haven't slept more than 2 hours in a row in 9 months. I have no social life. I'm barely hanging on. PTSD, can't sleep, no life, barely hanging on. It says the reports of rates of PTSD among education workers is now higher than some first responder professions like firefighters. 22 to 26% of the people surveyed for this report displaying PTSD-like symptoms. Unbelievable how bad it is. Joe in Halifax. Hi, Joe.
Hi there.
Yeah, hi, Joe. Good to hear from you. Thanks for calling. What can we do about this?
Yeah, I have been retired as a school principal in the Halifax area for 5 years now, and have experienced firsthand sort of the challenges with behavior. So I did stay the year of COVID, which adds another dimension to the challenges with our kids and families today in school and in society. So we have some pretty deep challenges, and our teachers are so well trained in teaching, and all they really want to do is teach and work with the kids to ensure that they meet their outcomes and that they're ready for the following year. The challenge becomes the deep behaviors that are within the classroom, the varying cultures that are in the classroom, and the lack of professional support for those teachers, as well as for the families that are struggling. And so we have a system whereby we have an education system, and then we have the health system, and they are two separate systems. However, the needs really cross over so deeply. And when funding comes available to education, a lot of the funding has to be directed towards behavior support systems. And yet, a lot of the professionals come from the health section of that system. So a lot of the educational funds really are health funds, and so our students are not getting a fair shake of the funding directly impacting their learning. A lot of it is directed towards behavior.
If I could, just based on your experience, you would have institutional knowledge about this that many of our listeners, and I would count myself among them, would not have. It seems to me through the discussions that we've had in the first hour, people have been suggesting, well, maybe it's a few bad apples. I'd like to know what you think about that. And if we could somehow separate them, create a separate learning environment where they would get the attention and the resources they need, everyone would be better off. The problem student would be better off, and the general school population would be better off. Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, the behaviors range substantially, and there are systems in place today that are there for students like this, and there are behavior specialists. There are programs that are put in place to help support kids in the classrooms, outside the classrooms. The programs are changing somewhat to adapt to those needs. Not every child is made to sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day. So we have to be fair and meet the child where they're at. And with every school, every society, there are bad apples, and they are our kids. So we want to do everything to support and bring them forward, because we want them to be contributors to our society. We want them to be successful. So those bad apples are a result of something that's bad in the society. Could be home is bad. Could be the system is just not treating them well. Could be poverty. Who knows? But it's our due diligence as parents, as our health system, as well as our educational system, to do all we can to help those kids, regardless of bad apples. I don't see our kids as bad apples. They come into our world as beautiful children, and so they were impacted by something in our society. And I'm not speaking about our special needs kids, but I've been in the office where a child has come into my office and destroyed my office because they couldn't go outside. And so, how do you destroyed my office?
Wow.
So
look, we have to go. I really thank you for your time. Yeah, they're deeper. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with our listeners today. Good to hear from you, Joe, in Halifax today. It's Talkback. There we go. Off and running. Second hour. 1-833-668-2577 to join the discussion here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
A new report out of the University of Ottawa by a pair of researchers there followed 4,000 education workers for a year, a whole school year. Says the country's schools now meet the criteria of hazardous workplaces because of violence in the class and harassment levels. Sharon is in Kitchener. Thanks for calling, Sharon. You're on the line.
Hi. I think this is such an important topic to be talking about. And it's the first time I've called, but I just felt that this was so important. I have a friend from Nigeria who moved here, and she has all kinds of degrees of teaching in her country. But here, of course, she had to go down the ladder, and so she's an EA. And she has 3 children a day that she's responsible for, and in the, from grades 1 to 3. And the children can act out any way they wish, and the teachers are not allowed to touch them. I mean, physically, they can't even put a finger on them. They cannot touch them. The kids can kick, spit, use foul language, throw things, and the only thing they can do is use their voice to try and calm the child down. Now, I'm not biased, but I know for a fact that some of this is cultural because boy children of certain cultures do not respect women. And so if it's a woman that's talking to them, even if it's the principal and she's a woman, they don't have to respect that person. Another thing that you talked about, and it's true, is that it causes so much distress in the classroom that at the last teachers meeting, and on their PD day, they talked about moving all of the children out of the classroom except the one that's acting up, so that they are not, exposed to this behavior. But the children, are taken to the library. It disrupts their learning. Sometimes the library is in use and they just have to stand in the hallway. And so it's really out of control. But I do believe
you have keyed in on something. This is very interesting, though. If I could just read a little bit from this report. This is identified in this report. This is, post-secondary university research. I'm not making this up. I'm just wondering if maybe this is what you're talking about. Results show that 82% of education sector workers who identified as women reported one or more acts, attempts, or threats of physical force from a student, compared to 50% of men. So if you're a woman in the education sector, you're much more likely to experience a violent act than if you're a man. I wonder if that plays into what you were suggesting. There's less respect for women in this role, if you will. Do you think there's anything to that? It wouldn't act out against a man as much as a woman? Sharon? Sharon, are you with me, Sharon? No? Oh, that's too bad. Okay, that's too bad. I wanted to ask her about that if she was actually keying into something there. Andre is in Kitchener. Hi, Andre.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for taking
hi,
my
Andre.
Call.
You're welcome.
Been listening to every word everybody's saying because they say kids are our future, right? So let's go back in the past a little bit. Myself, my dad was a trucker. My mom was alone with me. And it wasn't easy, when you're a brat like me or you're a kid. All kids are innocent, right? In my school, I've never seen bully. High school, I haven't seen bully. Late 70s, 80s, I guess it was all good. But the thing is that I've learned a lot from my mom. You want to be cool, you're a fool. Discipline, I heard it today, discipline, respect. I respected my mom like she was my goddess. Still, my dad and my mom passed away 10 years ago. And still, they look at me now and they laugh because I have two kids, right, 8 and 10-year-old. And here I am, doing this. And yes, it starts, example, what happened today is the school, the principal, called me because my son had a bad behavior. So this is the second time this year, Rob, and I'm sharing this because it's the truth, that as a parent, as a school, they did fantastic. They did what they can do. Yes, we do need more, a little bit of social counselors, stuff like that, fundings and stuff like that, yes. But now, the first time when it happened, oh boy, Mom was upset. And she said, well, he's doing the bathroom, he's doing this, he's doing chores. No,
right. Yeah, that's interesting, Andre. Yeah, that's interesting. Right. Because now what education workers are reporting is if you mention to the parents that their child is acting up, the parents now, I'm not going to paint all parents with the same brush, but some parents just can't fathom the fact that their children would misbehave at school. And what they're doing, some of them, they show up to the school and they're taking it out on the teacher or apparently anyone else they can find. It could be the clerical worker at the school. I'm telling you what, that is probably, Andre, a very different situation from when you and I were growing up. Because in my day, if you acted out in the school, you heard about it first of all from the teacher or the principal, and then when your parents found out, you got it for a second time, like your mom from your parents. Different world now. Very different world now. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
And we were talking to Sharon, and we got disconnected somehow. Sharon, you called back? Are you with me?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just mentioning that this research suggests that women in the educational system face more acts of violence than men. And I was asking you, do you think that's because some students would be more prone to acting out against a female worker instead of a male? What do you think about that?
I do, and this is where the cultural piece comes in, because I have another friend who is a teacher, and she was going into homes as a volunteer doing English as a second language, and she was observing, the family dynamics. And little boys were not. The mothers were not allowed to say no to the little boys if they pushed their sister or knocked her down or took her toys. That was okay. He was okay to do that because he was the boy. So.
Oh, I believe we have lost Sharon again. Sharon must be in a bad cell phone area. Sharon, we're going to have to wrap up our conversation there for today. Who do we have there next, Curtis? Dick? Is Dick on the line? Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Calgary then and try Dick. Yeah. Thank you, Dick, for calling. Go ahead.
Hi, Rob. There's a lot of your listeners who probably discard this suggestion, but it works. I was having problems with an acting out son in school, and you were talking about PTSD. That was describing exactly what myself and everybody that was in this group that I was with, it was experiencing. You couldn't read a book. You couldn't read the book. The group was called the Parent Support Association. And before you could go into it was free. It was all volunteers, but before you could go in there, you had to read this book. It was called How to Deal with Your Acting Out Teenager by Baird and Baird.
Baird and Baird. Okay.
What you were describing with PTSD was exactly what myself and everybody in the groups that I was in, I actually became a group leader and taught.
Good for you. Oh, good for you. Good for you. Baird and Baird, it's called. Dick, thank you for your call. Interesting. We have cleared the phone line, so every single phone line is available. It's been very, very busy on this topic today. If you're interested in joining the discussion, please do so right after the latest breaking news on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We have been discussing some ideas to return to some semblance of order in Canadian schools. It is at crisis levels. There's another report about this. It's a fairly new report. It's from the University of Ottawa. A pair of researchers there followed 4,000 education workers, surveyed them from time to time on violence and harassment in the school system, followed them for an entire school year, surveyed them throughout the school year. And the conclusion is that schools now meet the criteria of being hazardous workplaces. Schools are hazardous workplaces for the people working in the schools. For example, these researchers, they asked questions about burnout. Do you think you're burned out? Are you experiencing any of these symptoms that would indicate workplace burnout? Are you feeling tired or exhausted uninterested and disengaged, negative and cynical, less effective, unproductive. About 20% meet the formal definition of being burned out. Like I guess you would call it a clinical diagnosis. You are suffering from workplace burnout. Of course, if you know anyone who works in the education field, it's not like an 8 to 4, 9 to 5 job. Lots of work is brought home. And now these researchers say all of this baggage, all of this stress, all of this burnout comes home too, and it causes what? It causes issues at home. Like the stress of this workplace toxicity, it just, like, it doesn't end when the last bell rings and the school busing comes and takes everybody away. It is taking a toll on the families of these workers as well. Here's another firsthand account from this report. Quote, my partner knows that the first 15 to 20 minutes after I'm off is going to be a venting session daily. Then I will need 20 minutes to myself to simply decompress. This is the time I need just to be able to function. I go to bed much earlier now, and at 31 years old, I simply shouldn't be this exhausted. Here's another one. It's very draining and impacts how I feel, the energy I have at the end of the day when I'm done. When I come home, I'm often exhausted. I have very little interest in cooking, cleaning, or other activities with my family. Often I am touched out, which is hard when my kids would like to sit with me or cuddle. Goodness gracious me. It sounds like a terrible situation. 1-833-668-2577. Stephen is in Calgary today. Thank you for calling, Stephen.
How's it going, Rob?
Yeah, very good, Stephen. Thank you. What do we do about
caller,
this, Stephen?
Long-time listener, that's for sure. I wanted to give a different perspective. I'm one of the parents of the troubled children that are giving these teachers PTSD.
All right.
My daughter's in a program called Bridges. She suffers from severe oppositional defiance disorder. Since she was little, it has been a constant trip to the school, always, at least once a week, with some sort of situation. Now that she's in junior high and in a Bridges program, which is a wonderful program with wonderful teachers, and they focus on children that are struggling, and they have to put up with a tremendous amount. And some of the stuff and the way that my daughter talks to the teachers is 100% unacceptable, but she doesn't get it from home.
Where does it come from?
I don't know, social media, the groups, but I think it all stems from the parents. I agree with some of the things, but sometimes we can't take ownership because we don't know what we're doing. I grew up in a very different life, and I was not taught the tools needed to raise children.
Okay.
I ended up getting my children on an EPO just recently. And the daughter in question, she reads at a grade 4 level. She does math at a grade 3 level, and she can barely spell. And now we're trying to get her into Jack James, who also has a program that helps children like my daughter. But there is no will, no want. The biggest problem with my daughter is that she becomes confrontational when the teachers want her to use the tools that they are trying to give her to help her, and the tools that I don't know. All I can do, every time she gets suspended, we used to send her home on the bus, but we don't. I go and pick her up now because it's the only way I can directly involve myself in the discipline aspect of it, because they're not allowed to do very much. And at least that way, she's getting a face. She has to sit in a vehicle with me on the way home. We have our discussions and our talks, but without parents and the proper education or the proper knowledge, because my generation, the Gen X and then the one after that, our parents weren't, there was a lot of good parents, there was a lot of bad parents. There was a lot of young parents. And none of these parents were taught the same as me, and they transferred it on to their children, their children, their children. And now we have all these parents that don't have the life skills to raise children because somewhere down the line it was lost due to whatever it was the generation prior to mine or to theirs was doing in the upbringing of them.
I really appreciate you explaining all of this, Stephen. I really do. And what you're going through. When you have sought out, say, additional resources for your child, like what has that been like? Has it been a struggle? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, explain.
There isn't any. Bridges program is as far as they go. My daughter needs a medical intervention with all these other individuals, like through AHS. They do offer a certain type of program for it, but a child has to cause themselves self-harm to get into it. There is no precursor for them to get to that point. So they're as far as they can go in the school. This is it. But she needs more help on top of that. She needs proper diagnosis, proper assessment, 24-day programs where she is being monitored and watched. And I've been trying for 2 years to get her into these things. I have her set up with adolescent addiction and mental health services through AHS, and she's been with them for 4 years. And we've done everything and anything possible, the school included, and the teachers, who are great, because if you heard the stuff she says to them, it's embarrassing, it's horrible, and it's not the way we talk. But their hands are tied too. There's not much we can do. There needs to be, like in Ontario, I have one daughter that lives in Ontario with my ex-wife, and she's special needs. She goes to a school that is specifically designed, a school in Chatham-Kent, that is specifically designed for my daughter's disabilities, with a small class, more hands-on teachers, and she's excelling. Okay. We don't have that here. We don't have the resources to take the children and separate them into their own individual issues that they're having, so that we can help them deal with it, so they can be proper functioning adults and not a-holes when they get older, causing more problems.
All right. Stephen, we've got to go. Thank you for your honesty and your openness today, explaining what it's like to have to deal with your child and her problems. All the best to you. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. Violence in the schools. Violence in the schools, our topic of the day. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Just one quick departure from the topic of the day. I just wanted to bring to your attention, we now have $80 oil. I'm trying to find out when the last time oil was at $80. It's been a while as far as I know. But oil is up $6.22 right now. It's almost $81 a barrel. 80.88 cents U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures up 8.3% for today, with gas prices already climbing, all, of course, because of the situation in Iran. Now, back to our topic of the day. That's violence and harassment in Canada's schools at crisis levels, according to another new report. We're asking, what can we do to restore order in the classrooms of the country? Is it Deanna? Deanna or Diana? Deanna? Hello? Deanna? Is there anyone on the line? There's no one on the line. Okay, well, that's not good. Look, here's an idea. This is what they're trying to do where I am here in the province of Quebec. In the province of Quebec, as with everywhere else in the country, they brought in a whole new law about classroom conduct. It was passed through the legislature as part of the Education Act. All about civility and how students are expected to behave at school. And these are requirements. They're province-wide. They're mandatory. They're legally enforceable. And they are consistent across all public schools, all private schools, all across the province. And one of the big changes was how students are expected to address the staff in the school. It is to be formal. They're called civility measures, trying to institute an atmosphere of civility, but also discipline. So as a result, this is the law where I am. Students have to address the staff at the school in a formal way. It's Mr. It's Mrs. It's Miss. It's Sir. It's Madam. It's Monsieur. It has to be formal. Okay. And not just in the classrooms. It's like everywhere in the school. You bump into a member of the custodial staff, it's Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith. And the government did this because it says it's trying to reinforce authority, that the staff are in charge of the school and not the teachers. So if you've ever taken French lessons, there's a formal and a less formal way to address someone. If you were talking to a friend of yours, you would say tu, tu. The more formal way, if you were talking to a complete stranger, you would say vous, tu and vous. Vous is the much more formal way. And now in Quebec, whenever a student is speaking to a member of the staff, they're expected to say vous. You have to be formal. You have to use what we would call a polite language. What do you think about something like that? It's the law here. It's a requirement. Students must address school staff in the formal way. Mr., Mrs., Sir, Madam. Personally, I think they're kind of on to something. It kind of creates a hierarchy. The staff is up here and the students are not up there. They're down here. But it came in the same time the province banned cell phones in the classroom. They didn't just ban them from classrooms. They banned cell phones from the school grounds. You can't even use your phone while you're on the school grounds at all. Like in the playground, in the classroom, anywhere on the school grounds. But failing to address school staff in a civil manner comes with penalties. You're going to get a verbal warning, then you're going to get a written warning, then you're off to detention, and they will suspend you. And one of the more interesting things is that you have to write an apology. You have to write an apology. If a student doesn't speak to a staff member in the formal way, they have to write an apology. What do you think about something like that? The government is trying to encourage just basic civility in its student population. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Be right back on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Canada's schools now meet the criteria according to a new report of hazardous workplaces because of violence, because of harassment. That's been our topic today on Talkback. Jackie is up next in Calgary. Hi, Jackie. Thanks for calling.
Hi. So I'm sorry I haven't caught much of the show. I just tuned in, but I'm a retired high school principal, and I hope I'm hoping I'm not repeating too many things that are said here. But high schools are a snapshot of what's going on in society. So what you're seeing in schools is a reflection of what's going on in society. So as society becomes more violent, less tolerant of one another, you see that reflected in schools and the behavior of students. The other thing I wanted to say, which ties into a little bit about what you said about Quebec when they're going to vous instead of tu. We would have in our school, led by student leadership, we would have special days. And one of the special days that the students organized was dress up day. And that would be a day when the students would come all dressed up. And during those days, the behavior of the students changed. So we had significantly fewer problems when the students were dressed up. There's currently no dress codes in school.
So when you mean dressed up, they were like wearing more formal wear? Okay. All right.
Like almost like date night, if you will. They were getting dressed up to go to a special day. The girls were wearing dresses. The guys were wearing suits and ties, or just wearing shirts and nice shirts and ties. So it's just something different than the really grungy clothing and the pajama bottoms that kids frequently wear. And their behavior was different, and it kind of lends you to trying to see whether or not there's a connection between a dress code and student behavior in terms of having a little bit of respect for yourself. We have no leverage at all for what students wear. Schools are not really allowed to determine a dress code. And I think that's a missed opportunity, actually, because when you think about it, students going to school, it is their job. That's what they do. Their job is to go to school, and their job is to learn. So I think that if we could leverage a little bit more about even how they dress, that could send a message about this is your business. This is your job. This is where you come during the day.
Interesting. Look, we have about a minute and a half left. Part of this report from the University of Ottawa details how it's not just physical violence from students or harassment from students, but also from parents. I'm wondering if you experienced that in your professional life. Have you seen a shift in the way parents?
Oh,
yes,
absolutely. And I'll tell you, I might get in trouble for saying this, but there are, if you have never faced diversity in your life, so you come from a middle class background, born and raised here, very successful as parents, there is frequently a sense of entitlement that doesn't exist among people who have had to work really, really hard and start their lives over here. So in terms of entitlement, we want you to have guidelines, and we want you to have rules, and we want you to apply them to everybody except for my child. And frequently ran into that. So I could give you concrete example after concrete example where you are not to hold my child accountable for their behavior. If it's an internet school, the parents say, no, don't worry, we'll deal with it at home. No, actually, this is an issue that occurred in the school, and we will deal with it here.
We'll deal with it here.
The lack of support of holding students accountable by a specific, I don't know how to frame this, a specific type of parent is shocking. It's shocking.
Okay. I wish you had called earlier. That's our time for today. I really thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you to everyone who called today. Very busy. Back tomorrow, Friday, free for all Talkback. We can pick up on this topic or anything else. We'll start a brand new conversation tomorrow with your help. Until then, the latest breaking news is next on News Radio.